In the few minutes I have for rebuttal, I'm just going to address a couple of the points of pushback that Alan and our opponents, our friends on the other side, put forward. So first, it's not at all clear that when you look at the pre-14th Amendment definitions of citizenship in the United States, that jus soli ever really takes off in any real complete sense. First, it's not just because we roundly reject this idea of perpetual allegiance from the moment of the Declaration of Independence, but very early on, we start to see in our legal history an Americanized conception of jus soli that has inferred in it the importance of principles like permanent domicile and connections to this country. And this includes none other than Joseph Story himself, who by the 1830s was writing that one reasonable, perhaps Americanized, if you will, exception to jus soli, even in this country, would be to exclude the US-born children of itinerant travelers here for temporary work or business. And it's not just him. This very much develops into an Americanized conception of citizenship, even before the 14th Amendment. Consider, again, pre-14th Amendment, John Bingham, considered by many to be the father of the 14th Amendment, his discussions of constitutional citizenship during, say, the drafting of Oregon's state constitution. He says, "Who are the citizens of the United States? Sir, they are those and only those who owe allegiance to the government of the United States, and not the base, mainly perpetual, allegiance imposed upon it by the Saxons. But the allegiance which requires the citizen not only to obey, but to support and defend, and if need be with his life, the Constitution of the country. All free persons born and domiciled within the United States, within the jurisdiction of the United States, are citizens from birth." This understanding of allegiance and domicile as part and parcel with citizenship is documented again similarly with Bingham in 1862 in the debates over emancipation within D.C. He says, "Who are natural-born citizens but those born within the Republic? Those born within the Republic, whether black and white, are citizens by birth, natural-born citizens. All other persons born within the Republic, of parents owing allegiance to no other sovereignty, those are natural-born citizens." So whatever this conception of citizenship may have been prior to the 14th Amendment, and I think it's actually much messier than simply suggesting we adopted wholesale English common law, by the time Congress is debating the Civil Rights Act and the 14th Amendment, they have a very specific conception that is integrally tied to not being subject to a foreign power and being subject to our complete jurisdiction. And you see this in, let's just take the words of Senator Rebuttals Johnson. When he is going through this, he says, "All that this amendment, the 14th Amendment, provides is that all persons born in the United States and not subject to some foreign power, for that is no doubt the meaning of the committee which have brought them out before us, shall be considered citizens." And the amendment says that citizenship may depend on birth, and I know of no better way to give rise to citizenship than the fact of birth within the territory of the United States, born of parents who are at the time subject to the authority of the United States. And he says elsewhere, he means subject to the complete authority. And these words mean part and parcel of not owing allegiance to any foreign power. Allen is also right that they're concerned about more than the freed slaves. And you see this, again, he references Senator Cohen's discussion where Senator Cohen laments at one point making citizens, and very specifically the Chinese, and to use his term, the gypsy children, the Roma people, who he complains is, have they any more rights than temporary sojourners in this country? And of course he's roundly dismissed because that's racist, and they're obviously eradicating this distinction, this race-based barrier to citizenship. But notice how he laments it. He says, have they any more rights than temporary sojourners? Are we really going to make their kids citizens, but not the children of temporarily present aliens? And guess what no one corrects him on? That second aspect, this idea that yes, we are getting rid of race-based barriers, but not that we are getting rid of jurisdictional subjection to our complete jurisdiction barriers. And this also is why Wong Kim Ark's holding is correct. When you look at the Chinese Exclusion Act, we had created for Chinese immigrants and the US-born children thereof the exact same scenario under which we had placed the US-born descendants of slaves. We stripped from them their right of expatriation. We said you will always be Chinese subjects in a way that we never would have countenanced, and never did in fact countenance, for white people in this country. And so yes, they are eradicating that race-based permanent barrier in Wong Kim Ark. But keep in mind, this is the last time the court addresses this issue. Alan brings up Plyler. Plyler dealt with the Equal Protection Clause, which is a different part of the Constitution. It is a part of the Constitution wherein we see that distinction that Cohen makes clear. That yes, we are getting rid of these race-based distinctions, and yes, there is an extent to which everybody present in this country, Cohen says, of course we can't murder them. And he's correct. Yes, there are certain rights that people have. That does not mean they are subject to our complete political jurisdiction. It does not mean that other political rights, like military service, apply to them. And for these reasons, I think it is clear that when the 14th Amendment talks about jurisdiction, it is talking about not a race-based distinction, but absolutely a distinction based on permanent and complete allegiance, being subject to our complete political jurisdiction. And for these reasons, you should vote yes on the proposition.
Thank you, Amy. I'm going to be brief, famous last words. I want to make 3 points. The first, I'll start at the end there. The notion that the Equal Protection Clause deals with a, quote, different part of the Constitution. It's a different part of the 14th Amendment, perhaps, but it's certainly the same part of the Constitution. And it has been, I think, the adopted view of the legal academy that when Plyler versus Doe said the 14th Amendment applies, including to undocumented folks, that also controls the answer to this question. The second thing I want to address is the quote that jus soli, quote, never takes off. And I just don't think the primary source documents bear that out. And I read some of them in my principal time, but I do want to return to a couple of them. One is James Madison in 1789. I think you've heard of him. He wrote that, in general, place of birth is the most certain criterion. It is what applies in the United States. Lincoln's Attorney General said it even more directly. He said, if this be a true principle, and I do not doubt it, it follows that every person born in the country is, at the moment of birth, prima facie, a citizen. But why does that matter? Why does it really matter if it was jus soli from the beginning or not? The reason why it matters is it informs what the drafters of the 14th Amendment were up to. It informs the legal background and the assumptions made by people, the states, that were expected to understand and then ratify the 14th Amendment. And if what the 14th Amendment drafters were doing was this radical reimagining of jus soli, suggested by Amy, I think they would have done so a little more clearly. Because this is a doctrine that had been around for thousands of years, that we brought over from England and had followed since the founding of our country. If they were going to dramatically curtail that, if they were going to whittle that down, they were going to, quote, Americanize it by requiring that anyone lacking significant or long-term or complete or exclusive or absolute fidelity to the United States, I think they would have used one or some of those terms. But they didn't. They used very clear, unambiguous language. And the litigators in the room know that when you have unambiguous text, you don't actually have to go beyond that. The 14th Amendment is clear. President Trump has no authority to change the Constitution and chip away at the American tradition of birthright citizenship. Can it be changed? Sure. He needs 2/3 of each chamber and 3/4 of the states. I ask that you count no on the proposition.
I will in fact be brief this time. At the end of the day, we are not arguing about whether or not Donald Trump generally has good ideas or policies about immigration. We are not having a discussion about whether you like Donald Trump. We are not even having a discussion about whether you like me. We are having a very specific discussion about the original meaning and current application of the citizenship laws. And you don't have to take Donald Trump at his word about this being relevant to people who are subject to the complete and permanent jurisdiction of the United States. But you ought to take the people who drafted and ratified that document at their word when they say it's what this document does. And for that reason, you should vote yes.